All right. So let's start the meeting. We're going to be talking about the New Brunswick election today. I'm going to be breaking down why the Progressive Conservative Party won, why the other parties lost, and what went down, and how it compares to the 2018 election that I analyzed in the same province. So let's get started. First, let's talk about the province of New Brunswick. It's this little guy right here, just to the east of Maine. It is in the eastern region of Canada, known as Atlantic Canada or the Maritimes. Um, Something else that you need to know about New Brunswick is that it is a bilingual province. So there is a francophone uh, region in the north of New Brunswick because it borders Quebec. And then you have an English speaking south. Uh, as far as I know, the three main cities, Fredericton, St. John, and Moncton, and I believe Miramichi as well, are all Anglophone, but we'll look at the data later on. Um, and just to give you some context, the Atlantic Canadian provinces were famous for um, literally being all red in the 2015 election, meaning that all of them voted for the Liberals. All 32 districts in Atlantic Canada voted Liberal in Justin Trudeau's victory in 2015. And that kind of was a famous aspect of those provinces. Historically, New Brunswick typically swings back and forth between Liberal and PC, because if you're familiar with Canadian politics, you will know that the Progressive Conservatives are the provincial branch of the Conservative Party. But we'll talk about the parties soon. First, I just want to talk about the province of New Brunswick. Forestry is a big industry here. Yeah, that's something you should need to know. Of course, the largest city is Moncton, but the capital is Fredericton, and also don't forget about St. John. That's another important city. Has 10 seats in Parliament, 10 seats in the Senate. Doesn't make up a very large portion of Canada. Has a population of about 747,000. Estimate for 2020 Q3 is 781,000. Ranks 8th in population out of the 13 provinces and territories of Canada. Then the name is New Brunswicker, but in French they say New Brunswickois and New Brunswickoise for male and female. We don't need to know about some of that other data. The history isn't that important to the election that we're looking at. But here's a map. Let's take a look at this map of the province. I just want to help you visualize something right here. So look at this northern region right here. So actually, Miramichi is kind of on the border, I believe, of the Francophone region. So anywhere north of kind of this line right here that I'm forming with my mouse is Francophone. These big cities down here, Fredericton, St. John, and Moncton, are mainly Anglophone. This is the Anglophone region in the south, and this is the Francophone region up in the north. All right. So that's just something to keep in mind when we talk about this province. It is very important data, and yeah, you need to know that. Looking at demographics, as you can see, population boomed for a while, but now it's kind of leveling off. Looking at the demographics of New Brunswick, you can see the three main population centers I was referring to earlier: St. John, Moncton, and Fredericton. Of course, there are other major cities as well. Miramichi is up here. But for the most part, these are the three big cities where you have a lot of districts in the provincial legislature. And as you can see, by population, the three main cities easily stick out. St. John at 70,000, Moncton at 69,000. Oops. Sorry about that. St. John, Moncton, and Fredericton. Moncton is now larger than St. John. Also, the maritime provinces of Canada are kind of known for being a lot older. And looking at the metro areas, this helps a lot more. This is 2011 data, so pretty old, but 138,000, 127,000 95,000. These are clearly the three largest population centers in the province by far. And they have the highest population density as well. So they're a lot more urban, even though for the most part, this is still a very traditional province. Think of it as being east of Maine if you're familiar with American politics. So it's not like Moncton, St. John, and Fredericton are big cities with skyscrapers everywhere. These are no Torontos, okay? uh, anyway, looking at language, or oh no, this is ethnic origin. As you can see, 26.8% of the province identifies as French. These are very white provinces, just kind of like New England in America. European Canadians make up 95.7% of the population. You have some First Nations groups. Black Canadians make up 0.6%. South Asians and Chinese Canadians make up 0.3%. Here's very important. This is so key. And actually, let me annotate on this. Look at this right here. Very important. So English only is 57.15%. French only is 8.58%. English and French, 33.95%. And when we talk about politics in the province of New Brunswick, access to Francophone services province-wide is a very big issue for voters up in the north because they want to be able to go somewhere in the south of the province and be able to have a Francophone or a French speaker in the ambulance or French speaking services wherever they go because it is their province at the end of the day. And the three major cities are in the south. So clearing that little annotation, let's scroll down. But as you can see, only 57.15% of the province speaks only English. So 43% about of the province speaks some French. So that is something to consider here. And look at this. So as you can see, French speakers up in the north. As you can see, people are more likely in Canada to be moving out of New Brunswick to other provinces, such as maybe Ontario, Alberta, or British Columbia. So that is something to consider. Religion. It's about 50% Catholic as of 2011. Keep in mind that, you still do have kind of like that French tradition, sort of Protestant, 34%. So yeah, that's just a little demographic introduction to New Brunswick. And now I want to show you the map of what happened in the 2018 election as we introduce you to the parties and the system in New Brunswick. So this is what happened in 2018. Premier Brian Gallant. Wow, do I have a story to tell? So this was a crazy election, but basically Brian Gallant came into the election. This guy right here was premier, very young guy. Brian Gallant came in with a majority of seats on election day. Basically what happened was that Brian Gallant lost his majority, but still had 21 seats. Blaine Hicks at 22. And actually, let me pull up something else, another document. So these are my results from the last election. So this was crazy because look, the Liberals won the popular vote by over 5 points and they still lost the seats. Look. So Liberals won the popular vote. PCs only got 22 seats. And now let's talk about the parties here. So the Liberal Party, similar to the Liberal Party of Canada, they are on the center left. The PCs, these are the Progressive Conservatives. Even though progressive and conservative don't sound like they would mix together in America, they're called the Progressive Conservatives in Canada. that's because of history, but basically they're center right, and they're definitely way further to the left than the Republicans. Then you have the right wing or far right party, which is the People's Alliance. They really care about, um, you know, priorities, and they think that funding for francophone services across the province is something that needs to be scrapped. They won 12.6% of the vote last time. The Greens won 11.9% of the vote and 3 seats for the first time as well. The New Democratic Party has a history. They are progressive. They have a history of being strong in this province, but the rise of the Greens kind of gets rid of that since both those parties are further left than the Liberals. And then Independents and the KIS Party are very minuscule. The KIS Party is the Keeping It Simple Party. They are a libertarianish party, but as you can see, there are two parties on the right already. So now let's use what we know about what happened last election and create a little pie chart. So this is what happened, right? So look at this, right? So the Liberals won 37.9% of the popular vote. The Progressive Conservatives won 32% of the vote. The Greens and the People's Alliance both won just over 10% of the vote, and the NDP was at 5%, right? Now let's look at what happened with the seat count. This is a little bit different. And I'll cover up this data on the bottom since it's not that important. As you can see, Liberals, PCs, Greens, People's Alliance, Greens. So this is how the seats looked. So the NDP got 5% of the vote, but still Canada uses proportional representation. So even though their districts are not gerrymandered like America's, they still didn't do too well. And then you had, 3 seats. As you can see, the Liberals wanted to form a coalition with the Greens, but that only gives them 24 seats. You need 25 for a majority. At the end of the day, the Progressive Conservatives and the far right People's Alliance Party formed a coalition, and they had a 25-24 lead. However, over time, things happen, and basically, Blaine Hicks called a snap election in the middle of the pandemic. But here was the map last time. As you can see, there's a very important conclusion that I want to make right here. As you can see from the election results last time, the northern region votes Liberal, and they are Francophone, right? The southern region, for the most part, is Progressive Conservative. And this is an important thing to notice. This will definitely be relevant as we look at the results from this election. So pay close attention. All right, so let's meet the leaders. I'm not going to talk that much about the party leaders because many of them are the same. Blaine Hicks is the same guy from 2018. He led his minority government, and he, during the pandemic, was leading a nice little cabinet group with all of the it was a task force for coronavirus response, and he had a member from each major party on this little group, and they would make important decisions about what to do with the virus. And now we have Kevin Vickers. So this guy actually is famous for being the heroic officer who helped prevent what could have been a very catastrophic terrorist attack on Parliament Hill in Canada several years back. He, I believe, tackled the terrorist on that fatal day, or not that fatal day, but on that crazy day in Canadian history. Then you have David Kuhn, this guy, great speaker, really trying to break two-party system that used to exist in New Brunswick. And he did that successfully by elevating his Green Party to 3 seats. And then this is Chris Austin, the far right guy. And his party did very well. And his party actually did better than the Greens in the last election. And then Mackenzie Thomason leads the New Democrats, but they're so insignificant here that I'm not really going to address them. So first, before we look at any results, we're going to look at how the election night went down. So, this is kind of just a little fun thing. The Progressive Conservatives, opened up election night with a 10-point lead. Eventually, at the end of election night, their lead was only 4 points looking at the popular vote. The seat count, here's a look at how election night went. Sorry, I probably should have made this earlier, but yeah, here's a look at how the election night went. Liberals are red. The Greens are green. The People's Alliance is purple. And oh, Lord, I forgot to look at the polling data. But anyway, I'll just kind of recap what the polls were saying. The polls have been indicating that the PCs would probably win a majority government. They usually had a lead of about 10 points over the Liberals. People were expecting the People's Alliance to have a really bad night and the Greens to do a little bit better. But this is how the parties kind of performed relative to their expectations. Now let's take a look at the overview. So, before the election, Liberals at 20 seats, the PCs at 20 seats, the Greens at 3, the People's Alliance at 3, and there were 3 vacancies. After the election, Liberals went from 20 to 17. PCs went from 20 to 27. The Greens went from 3 to 3. PA went from 3 to 2. Vacancies went from 3 to 0. And looking at the popular vote, Liberals went from 37.8 down to 34.35. The PCs went from 31.89 up to 39.34. The Greens went from 11.88 up to 15.24. PA went down a few points from last time, and they did lose a seat. And then others, that includes the New Democratic Party, plunged from 5.85 down to 1.88. The New Democrats won about 5% of the vote last time. They went way down to about 1% of the popular vote. They were barely even relevant this time. So let's take a look at what happened. So here we are looking at the results, and this is kind of complicated. This is just to look at what happened all over the province in every single district. And actually, first I want to show you the map. And I want to put the maps from this election in 2018 next to each other, just so we can compare. So this is 2018. This is 2020. They're not centered properly, but you get the point. So once again, Liberals did very well up in the north. PCs did well in the south. So that regional distribution is similar. Also, looking at Moncton, People's Conservatives, or the Progressive Conservatives, did a good job flipping some seats in Moncton. They flipped 2 seats that were previously held by the Liberals in Moncton. Liberals got their only seat in St. John flipped. And then Miramichi remained a 3-way split, with 1 seat being Liberal, 1 seat being People's Alliance, and 1 seat being Progressive Conservative, sorry. And then Fredericton went from 1 Liberal seat to none. There was one very important result, and I want to go to this district in particular. In the district of Miramichi, Liberal leader Kevin Vickers did not hold a seat prior to the election. You may ask, why did the party leader not have a seat? That's because he ran for party leadership and won, even though he didn't have a seat. And he made a bad decision of running against an incumbent in a district that wasn't a sure victory for him. So literally, liberal incumbent Kevin Vickers lost terribly in this district. It was a big embarrassment for him. Actually, when we go to results by writing, look at this. He lost to the far right party 35-27 to 22-39. That is embarrassing. Look at the actually, I'm not going to make a pie chart here. That would take too long, but you get my point. Here's how it broke down. Actually, let me highlight the Miramichi column. These are all the districts together. Where's Miramichi? It should be, oh, right here. Look how big the People's Alliance is and look at how little they are. And then looking at the results overall, liberals dominated in the north. These districts right here are all in the north, as well as in these districts here, and then those down south. Well, not down south, but at the bottom of my data. The progressive conservatives did very well in the south. And as I talk about the three main population centers, let's look at this. Let's look. So Capital Region, progressive conservatives, progressive conservatives, progressive conservatives. Oh, we had a green. Sorry, let me illustrate this in a better way. So in the Moncton region, these are the Moncton region districts, right? So liberals reduced to just one seat left. And then in the Fredericton area, liberals were wiped out. That's not good for them. And at the end of the day, that's the key. So when you look at the map, these were the results from this election, right? They ran up the popular vote in the north, and that's why they still had 34.49% of the popular vote. But the problem is they could not dominate in the three main population centers. And, one of the struggles of this election was that none of the parties could really break this divide. And this north-south divide based on language is very serious. And one issue that really complicated that was the debate about rural hospitals. And regarding rural hospitals, it was very contentious because at one point in the election campaign, Blaine Hicks was considering reducing the hours of rural hospitals from 24/7 to, I forgot how many hours, but it was definitely going to be significant. And the Liberal Party definitely pressed hard. The Greens did as well. I think even the People's Alliance did. And eventually he dropped that promise, but still a lot of voters with healthcare on their minds went to the polls knowing that this is somebody who did threaten to reduce rural healthcare. So, this is definitely an interesting dynamic. It is very tough. I mean, look at how the PCs ran at the margins. Districts 41, 39, and 28. The Liberals are not that far from a majority. They're only 8 seats away from a majority. They literally just need to improve in Moncton, St. John, and Fredericton. And, they have one in Miramichi. They could win the other two back as well. And that loss of Kevin Vickers was just very significant. And honestly speaking, the People's Alliance didn't have that great of a night. They're down by about 4 percentage points from last election. They lost a seat somewhere in the South region. And in fact, they lost this District 31 seat right here. That is in Fredericton, York. But they defeated Kevin Vickers, and that gave them a lot of momentum, or not momentum, but it gives them something to celebrate. And Chris Austin, of course, the party leader, held on to his district as well. So, all I'm saying here is this north-south divide is serious. And the Greens, looking at the Greens, they increased from about 12% to 15%. But that was really only the Greens taking advantage of the decline of the NDP. And let's illustrate that. Looking at the swings. So the swings tells us in which district, in each district, how each party did. And this is a map, or this is a graph right here. And as you can see, liberals gained ground in a lot of the northern ridings, and the conservatives gained a lot of ground almost everywhere else in the province. And the Greens made their gains where they did as well. And the NDP plunged everywhere. And the People's Alliance also plunged in a lot of districts as well. But regarding my point about the Greens not really doing that well, let's look at the ridings where they did the best. In Restigouche-Chaleur, Greens are up 15.2 because the NDP is down 9.3. Caraquet, they're up 11.8 because the NDP is down 6.4. Chediac-Beaubassin. Oh, that's interesting. So in this district, they actually did gain much of their support from the Liberals. Maybe it was an unpopular Liberal candidate. Look at this. In Dieppe, 15.1% increase of the popular vote for the Greens, and a 12% decrease for the New Democrats. Look like they actually gained most of their ground in Moncton Center from the decline of an independent who got nearly 20% of the vote in 2018 in that Moncton Center district. And it looks like they actually gained a lot of ground from either the Liberals or the People's Alliance. I would guess probably the Liberals and Freddie North. And then they gained most of their ground due to the losses of the People's Alliance in Fredericton and Grand Lake, but that's kind of an outlier. Most of the other ones are due to the decline of the NDP. Still, on average, when you average out all the swings, the Progressive Conservatives averaged a gain of 7.5. Liberals averaged a loss of 3.5. Even though they made big gains, where they're strong. In fact, they gained 39 points in Chippewa-Lamec. Look at some of these losses in the South. Minus 24 in St. Croix, minus 20 in Fundy St. Isles. So, they're really struggling in the South. And, the province is still divided on language terms. And that's bad. It's unhealthy. And I think that was something that I saw a lot in the election night coverage, that the linguistic divides that plague this province politically are only getting worse. And that the social cleavage is very concerning. Blaine Hicks tried to campaign on a platform that would unite the province. And I mean, all of the leaders in their victory and concession speeches, all the main leaders that I watched who gave speeches addressed the fact that this is an issue. And I think the Green Party candidate did a good job at that as well. But notable piece of the platform for the Greens is that not only are they looking for environmental concerns to be addressed regarding climate change and green energy, investing in green energy and proportional election systems, they also were the only party here that was really pushing for an inquiry into policing in New Brunswick regarding the rise of the Black Lives Matter movement over the summer in Canada. And a statue of, I believe, Samuel de Champlain was toppled, and that was condemned by Trudeau. But many progressives in Canada said that it was time for that statue to go. So, Canada's definitely trying to reckon with its history. It's not as deep as America's history because Black Canadians are not as significant of a demographic group in Canada. But, there have definitely been a lot of incidents with not only Black Canadians, but also Indigenous peoples encountering police and violent events occurring in the West and interactions with police there. So, looking at New Brunswick, this election was definitely unique. Looking at some more takeaways and trying to recap this. Looking at the map, you can clearly see that it's a divided province. The North is still overwhelmingly liberal. The South is a mixed bag, but mainly conservative, mainly progressive conservative. And you have a couple green seats in the Southeast. Um, looking at the Green Party, they did have a lot of second place finishes, and I want to definitely pay attention to that. Uh, and they had 22% in Restigouche West, 28% in Restigouche Chaleur. They had about 16% of the vote in Caraquet, 27% of the vote in Chediac-Beaubassin. They had 27% of the vote also in Moncton Center. That's an urban kind of downtown district where they almost beat the Liberals. 19% in Moncton South. So they're doing pretty well in Moncton, I gotta say. 23% in St. John Harbor. Look at this. And the Greens really do pose a threat to the Liberals because look at a district like this one, St. John Harbor, right? 23% for both the Liberals and the Greens. Only 41% of the vote is going to the Progressive Conservatives, who are on the right side of politics. So the two parties on the left combine for 46% of the vote, but they're split dead even between these two parties. And it's not this dramatic in every district. Many of the other districts, you look at the average. On average, each district is 34% liberal and 15% green, but that's still a combined 49% of the vote. And it's a lot harder for the liberals to win a majority of the seats now or a majority of the popular vote because of the Greens. Look at the Greens. They ran out the vote totals in Kent North and Memramcook-Tantramar. That one always gets me. As well as in Freddie South, where they won 54% of the vote. The People's Alliance ran out the vote in Fredericton Grand Lake, where they won 46.2%, as well as in Miramichi, where they famously defeated the Liberal leader by about 17 or 16 percentage points. Double-digit victory for them over the Liberal leader who was kind of expected to win. Because the People's Alliance ended up getting about 9% of the vote, but they were polling around 5%. That was kind of one of the big surprises of the election night. Was definitely that Miramichi riding. Looking at the New Democrats, the NDP is extremely weak. Look at how small their little pieces of the pie are here. And why is that happening? As I explained earlier, it's the Greens. And the Liberals are a very strong brand up, especially in the North. Yeah. It's impossible for Blaine Hicks to really win that big of a majority because of the Liberals' strength in the North. And maybe COVID-19 will help him in another election. I think COVID-19 did help him here, certainly. And he would not have been able to win a majority government without COVID-19 because New Brunswick has been very, very successful in combating the virus. And that definitely played a role here. It was certainly risky for him to call an election in the middle of the pandemic, but it really paid off for him because his government's positive handling of the virus was on the top of voters' minds. And so at the end of the day, he took a gamble and it worked. And at the end of the day, his majority isn't that big anymore. Or his new majority isn't that big. Only 55% of the seats, 27 out of 49. And honestly, he could probably only get up to 30, maybe if he gains ground in a couple seats up north. But you look at the map, you look at the north-south divide, it's definitely very easy to see what's wrong. And it's also easy to see that the Liberals are literally only, a few urban seats away from being very competitive in the next election. So it's not necessarily an awful moment. Kevin Vickers did resign from his leadership post of the party. And at the end of the day, he just struggled to connect with voters and they didn't know who he was. He couldn't go out and campaign because of COVID. So he didn't have a chance to really do anything. So at the end of the day, he struggled because of that. And because Michelle Conroy was an unusually strong or unexpectedly strong candidate in Miramichi. Uh, so the Liberals definitely have some soul searching to do. They need to find a new leader um, before the next election, which will probably be in 4 years. But I think that they certainly are not too bad off. At least they do have a strong base up north that they can count on. And in fact, they gained ground in the north, in the northern districts. One of these districts voted 82% liberal, the highest margin of victory, or the highest percentage of the vote attained by any party. Even though the PCs won the election, most of their biggest districts victories were in the 60s. So yeah, I mean maybe they got to 70 one time. Let's look. Oh, here's the spectrum. I want to show this off. Looking at the data for the PCs. Yeah, their maximum was 68.1. This is a spectrum. This kind of shows you on the left-right spectrum. So I put the NDP on the far left, the Greens, and then the Liberals, others, the PCs, and the PA. So following the political spectrum of left to right. As you can see, a lot of these districts up north are about 2/3, maybe even 3/4 liberal green. And a lot of these ridings down in the south have much stronger People's Alliance candidates. The Greens are still strong here too, and this is kind of the struggle. The two main parties are kind of sandwiched in between, the People's Alliance on the far right and the Greens on the far left, and then you have these battles being waged here. But as the Liberals struggle in these urban districts in the South, it really becomes impossible for them to win a majority. Look at this. Moncton Center only 38.9, 30% in Moncton South, 30%, 31, 22% in Moncton Southwest. They need to improve in these rural areas in the South. And that is my diagnosis. If I were a doctor saying, what does the Liberal Party of New Brunswick need to do to win the next election? It's very simple. All they got to do is improve in these population centers in the South. Moncton, St. John, and Freddie York. Or not Freddie York, but Fredericton. So at the end of the day, that's my analysis. Thanks for watching and have a great day, y'all.